We're now in phase 2 of the 3.8 banner, making this the last version 3 phase before Fontaine. This phase, Wanderer and Kokomi are getting rerun banners, and in today's video, we'll be doing an in-depth guide on Wanderer, as we'll be breaking down his kit, artifact sets, unit synergies, best teams, and his overall tier and placement as a unit. Wanderer is a 5-star Anemo DPS character whose main purpose is to deal on-field Anemo damage through his normal and charge attacks. Because of his role, his success is very limited as he requires a proper setup to perform his role. Wanderer has a 3-hit normal attack sequence, with the 3rd hit doing 2 instances of damage. As a catalyst, his normal attacks inherently deal Anemo damage. His charge attack consumes stamina and after a short period deals AoE Anemo damage in the form of a high wind pressure. Wanderer's elemental skill is where most of his gameplay lies in. Casting his elemental skill deals an instance of AoE Anemo damage and causes him to float in the air, entering the wind favored state. Wanderer will have a separate stamina bar when in this state, representing his Kugoyoku points. At base, Wanderer has 100 points, and these points are consumed over time. Dashing or holding jump will consume Kugoyoku points. While in the wind favored state, although Wanderer can't do plunging attacks, his normal and charge attacks deal more damage and have a wider AoE. Additionally, his charge attacks do not consume points throughout this state's duration. Note that the normal and charge attacks he deals in the wind favored state are considered normal and charge attack damage. The wind favored state ends either when he runs out of points or when the user casts the elemental skill button mid-duration. Wanderer's elemental burst deals 5 ticks of AoE Anemo damage. Casting his elemental burst while in the wind favored state will immediately end the state after its animation. This incentivizes players who want to use his burst every rotation to do his combos first and save his elemental burst at the end just as Wanderer is about to run out of points. His burst has a 15-second cooldown and a 60 energy cost, letting him be allowed to safely run little to no additional energy recharge in his stats. For his talents, level up his normal attack and elemental skill as they contribute to most of his damage output. Leveling his elemental burst is fine, but not necessary since its damage is not really worth building energy to use every rotation. Wanderer's Ascension 1 passive allows him to absorb up to 2 elements simultaneously to obtain buffs when using his elemental skill. Hydro extends his wind favored state by another 20 points, Pyro grants him a 30% attack increase, Electro restores energy from successful normal and charge attacks, and Cryo increases his crit rate by 20%. These buffs last throughout the majority of wind favored state's duration. The most effective absorptions are the Pyro and Cryo elements as they grant him beneficial offensive buffs. Note that absorption can also occur on elemental effects on himself. For example, using his elemental skill while affected by Pyro from being in Bennett's elemental burst grants him a Pyro buff. His Ascension 4 passive unleashes 4 wind arrows that deal 35% of his attack as Anemo damage each. These have a base 16% chance to be triggered when he dashes after he hits opponents with normal or charge attacks, in the wind favored state. Each time the arrows don't trigger, this chance increases by 12%. While this passive gives him additional damage on the side, using it isn't really a priority for most of his rotations since dashing is often only used for dodging or getting somewhere quickly. For combos, it depends on preference and the situations that you are in. In most cases, doing 2 normal attacks followed by a charge attack is the general combo. This sequence can be done 5 times with an additional 1 to 2 normal attacks at the end. You can also repeatedly spam his charge attack, which can be especially useful in situations where AoE damage is preferred. If Wanderer is paired with units that give him additional attack speed and normal attack buffs like Yinjin, Toma, or Jean, then you can opt to just use normal attacks throughout his elemental skill's duration. All these combos have similar damage outputs and primarily depend on outside factors. Now let's get into his constellations, starting with his Constellation 1. This constellation grants him a 10% attack speed increase when in his wind favored state and makes his Ascension 4 passive deal 25% more attack as damage. He effectively gains the attack speed from Desert Pavilion Chronicle, which allows him to get an additional 1 to 2 normal attacks in his rotation sequence. It also makes artifact options like Shimenawa's even more resin efficient. His C1 provides a DPS increase of up to 10%, making it a decent constellation to go for. Wanderer's C2 makes his elemental burst deal 4% more damage for every point difference between his max and current Kugoyoku points. As a reminder, he has 100 points at base and 120 points if he absorbs Hydro. The max amount of damage increase through this method is 200%, meaning he gains the max increase when the aforementioned difference is 50 points. This constellation incentivizes players to use his elemental burst every rotation, with it being better used at the end of the rotation. His Constellation 2 is overall about a 15% DPS upgrade from his Constellation 1, making it a worthwhile constellation to get if you can afford it. His Constellations 3 and 5 increases his elemental burst and skills upgrade levels by 3 respectively. As they are talent upgrades, they don't really provide much of an increase to his overall damage output. Wanderer's C4 gives him a random elemental buff for his Ascension 1 passive if he absorbs an element through his elemental skill. This allows him to have up to 3 elemental buffs simultaneously. Note that the additional buff must be one that wasn't initially absorbed. For example, if he initially absorbs Cryo and Pyro buffs, then the third buff can either be Hydro or Electro. His C4 can be beneficial if he doesn't absorb Cryo or Pyro initially, but otherwise it doesn't guarantee much of a DPS increase, making it a relatively lackluster constellation. His C6 grants him the following effects after hitting opponents with normal attacks while in the wind-favored state. Wanderer deals an additional instance of normal attack damage that deals 40% of its original damage and restores or Kyuguroku points when he falls below 40 points. The point restoration can occur once every 0.2 seconds and can happen up to 5 times during wind-favored's duration. By constantly increasing his wind-favored state's uptime, he has a longer window to deal damage. The only downside is it extends his rotation time, making it difficult to maintain any external buffs in his Ascension 1 passive. Regardless, this provides a significant DPS increase of about 25% from his Constellation 5, which is really nice for a 5-star C6. Overall, pulling for constellations for Wanderer, as is the case with most 5-stars, isn't worth that much. However, if you're someone with lots of Primos saved or a longtime Wanderer fan and you don't think you're going to get any of the upcoming Fontaine characters in the next patch, then getting Wanderer C2 or even C6 if you really want to can be very beneficial. 4-piece Desert Pavilion Chronicle or Shimenawa's Reminiscence are his go-to sets, as both passives buff his normal and charge attack damage. Desert Pavilion grants more damage percent buffs and slightly faster attack speed, while Shimenawa's grants a slightly higher damage percent stat and provides a bit more attack percent. The damage difference between the two sets is within a less than 5% range, making Shimenawa's a more resin efficient option if you don't already have a good 4-piece Desert Pavilion set. You can opt to use 2-piece mixes like 2 attack to Anemo, double attack, or double Anemo. However, the 2-piece mixes are only good early game or if you don't have a solid 4-piece, as they offer significantly less damage compared to the 4-piece sets. Wanderer has a decent selection of weapon options. For 5 stars, his best in slot Tolaitola's Remembrance will be his best weapon choice, as it provides a normal attack speed increase and damage percent buffs. It is especially good to do normal attack spam with this weapon. Other 5-star weapons like Skyward Atlas, Lost Prayer, and Kakura's Verity will pull close to his best in slot, as they perform only marginally worse compared to it. For 4 stars, would still be the go-to and takes priority at higher refinements. While it can perform like some of his 5-star options, its passive effect is random and can result in him gaining an unappreciated Elemental Mastery buff. Other than Wood Sith, there's really either Solar Pearl or Dodoco Tails as nice follow-ups. Solar Pearl offers a more consistent output, while Dodoco Tails at higher refinements requires a slightly altered rotation by using its Elemental Burst first and alternating between a normal attack and a sequence of charge attacks. Wanderer prefers playing in teams such as a Hypercarry team, making him synergize best with units like Faruzan and Bennett. Faruzan offers Anemo damage boost and res shred with her elemental burst, and at C6 provides both an Anemo crit damage increase and additional bonus damage. Bennett offers healing, a flat attack increase, and Pyro self-infusion that allows Wanderer to reliably gain the Pyro buff from his Ascension 1 passive. Although I won't go too in depth about Faruzan, one thing that I will mention is Wanderer's damage output when she's pre-C6 versus at C6. Assuming Wanderer is running 4 pieces at Pavilion in a Bennett, Faruzan, and Flex unit comp, Faruzan at C6 grants anywhere from about a 13 to maybe a 20% damage increase versus without C6 on average. This makes Wanderer somewhat reliant on having Faruzan at C6 to reach his peak performance. However, even without her C6, he'll still be able to dish out enough damage on his own. One thing to keep in mind is that Faruzan without C6 is also prone to energy related issues, requiring her to have more energy recharge in her stats. The last slot can be filled with any flex unit, preferably a character with defensive utility like Zhongli, Toma, or Layla. Toma and Layla become even more valuable when at C6 and C4 respectively. Toma's C6 provides an extra damage boost for Wanderer's normal and charge attacks, while Layla's C4 boosts his normal and charge attack damage based on a percentage of her max HP after her elemental burst shoots a projectile. Layla also gives the potential benefit of Wanderer obtaining the cryo buff, although getting it requires proper timing. If Kazuha or Venti are free to use, you can slot them as the flex unit to make a triple Anemo team. This team is especially useful in situations where grouping is very appreciated. However, units like Kazuha often prefer to be used in teams like National or Freeze, where they find a bit more value. Teams like Double Hydra with Zincho and Yalan or Double Pyro with Bennett Jiangling can be used, but the main issue with these teams is that there's just better options or slots that they can fill and often are not worth putting in Wanderer teams. Let's give an example of a Wanderer rotation. For this team, we'll use Wanderer, Bennett, Faruzan, and Zhongli.
Stabilize.
We'll see about that. Have fun with this gift. Going in.
Behold. Know the place.
Now let's get into some general pros and cons for Wanderer, starting with his pros. When set up properly, Wanderer fulfills his role as a hypercarry very well and can deal sufficient damage even without things like C6 Faruzan. His elemental burst is not important to build around, making him a character who requires little to no energy recharge in his stats. Because his charge attack's AoE is increased while in the wind favored state, this makes him decently good both in single target and AoE situations. Not only is Wanderer good in Abyss content, but his skill short cooldown makes him feel amazing to use in the overworld, as he can reach high places and travel large distances with ease. One of Wanderer's main downsides is that he is somewhat reliant on Faruzan's C6 to achieve max damage potential. Although not having it isn't the worst thing in the world, her buff is relatively significant in terms of the damage increase it provides, alongside the fact that it alleviates her own energy needs. Wanderer also needs a defensive option in most cases as he's very prone to getting interrupted while in his win-favored state. This makes shielders like Zhongli, Toma, and Layla basically almost a necessity unless you're very confident in your game mechanics. Despite having increased AoE in his win-favored state, he doesn't really have good crowd control to group enemies like other Anemo units. Based on everything said so far, what tier would I place him in? Well, I can confidently say Wanderer is around a low A, high B tier character in my opinion, especially based on his ownage to usage ratio across recent patches after his release. He is good, but that's all he is. Good. Wanderer as a unit by himself doesn't provide a significant upgrade to most accounts and primarily finds value for those who either want another team on their account for funsies or just want more DPS characters. Otherwise, he's a unit you'd only really get mainly because of factors like personality or his gameplay. Alright, and that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Genshin Impact content. Let me know your thoughts on Wanderer, whether you already have him, plan to get him, or maybe you're skipping him for Fontaine characters. And until the next video, which will be on Kokomi, bye bye.